survival tactic. That's why I say not all, and I wouldn't put everybody in this box, but the work that I've done has allowed me to see the other ways of those living in the community, how they survive, right? Like I said, when harsh weathers come about, they'll either check themselves into an ER, psychiatric facility. It's dry, messed up. I remember working in the ER, and there was a child who the aunt was the guardian of. The girl was autistic, but sometimes when they're really young, they try not to put labels on them because you don't want that to be their identity as they get older and be treated a certain way based upon a diagnosis. But the girl was sometimes aggressive towards her family members, and she was dropped off at the hospital. But people were familiar with her. The aunt left her at the hospital for almost 2 months. Yeah, and it got to the point where we had to call CPS, but the county that they lived in versus the county that we're in, it was a lot. Trying to get two different types of CPS, it was just a nightmare. And the crazy part about it is the aunt that dropped her niece off was a nurse. Basically, she was burnt out, and the aunt has done that before. It was before I started working there. But the aunt went on vacation and she dropped her niece off at the hospital because a lot of people think that I dropped them off at the hospital, they're safe. People do that.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
they do that a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how do you deal with, because we're getting into the holidays, right? How do you guys prepare for high risk crisis situations that we know are coming, because this is like the time frame, family, money being spent, gifts being given, and people who don't have that, or they may have lost their job and they're dealing with a lot of other things in their lives. There's a lot of suicidal folks or people who deal with a lot of stressors. How do you guys prepare for that for this season?
We just go with the flow. And so I know working at the psych hospital, we would get certain frequent flyers, certain times of the year, because the holidays remind them of being with their loved one that's no longer living. Sometimes they just need to be in a safe space because some of them know themselves well enough that they're going to get into this depressive state
Hmm.
and that they need to be in a secure place because they know what can potentially happen to them.
They're
So
self-aware.
you have a lot of people that when it comes to that time of the year, they will utilize 988 a little bit more. They'll utilize psychiatric facilities. They will utilize going to the ER a little bit more because they don't want to harm themselves. They know it's a situational matter, but they just need to be around either sometimes a positive setting, or a lot of them sometimes don't have a therapist or psychiatrist, right? Some don't feel they need one, but realize in certain times, either anniversaries because people to feel a certain way, anniversaries of the passing of somebody or the birthday of a family member that's no longer here, are just as equally impactful to an individual.
Then the holidays.
Correct.
That makes sense.
We come across people like that. And like I said, you can't really prepare much. We just sometimes are prepared to just work more. We're just prepared to, I don't want to say prepared to be compassionate because you should be compassionate in general. When I go out, I try to be a little bit more graceful with people, especially certain times of the year, because we don't know what the next person is going through. We just try to be a little bit more graceful towards people around the holidays, but then also to incorporate compassionate just on an everyday basis because we're all that one situation away from being on a hold, that one situation from being in a hospital setting or on medication. Sometimes
That's scary for you to even think about.
you
But
think
that's
about
true.
it, you lose your job. A lot of us were paycheck to paycheck. Lose your job. That affects your roof. That affects the food that you prepare, your kids, if you have kids. It's just a ripple effect. And so now you become into this depressive state. And then sometimes the time of the year, getting jobs is not as easy as it used to be. So it's a lot. Like I said, we're all one situation away. It just depends on what resources you have. And the whole saying, check on your family, check on your friends.
Right.
That's a real important thing because we have a lot of family members and friends that are actually going through things and people don't necessarily check on them because we're used to them being okay. We're used to seeing them holly jolly and just being who they are, not knowing what they're actually going through. And again, therapy is not for everybody. So other outlets are just as equally important. Learning how to meditate, maybe sometimes going to the gym. Therapy, again, doesn't have to necessarily be a person. It can be a space that you're in or a space that you create.
So, quick question,
Is
and
it
I don't
any-
know if this even pertains to you. Now you've got like the one that I've been hearing a lot about, BetterHelp, and then
Mhm.
there's like these other ones as well. Do you see that by chance people are taking those avenues that maybe you'll see less people where you work? Does it even compute?
I would say you also have to realize I feel like online therapy is actually really good because sometimes people don't want others to know that they're seeking therapy. Seek therapy within an enclosed place, and you're
Mhm.
able to be. Sometimes people are more authentic in their own space, but it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't make it less people that we're going to see the psychiatric. It helps. It gives them a resource to fall back on. But then you also have to
Mhm.
think about it. If this person that you're meeting with is prescribing you some medications, bipolar, or for whatever reason, if you have
Mm.
like right? A therapist doesn't necessarily prescribe you the medication that a psychiatrist prescribes. So say this person is connected with the psychiatrist, the therapist, and so on and so forth, but they don't feel, because you take your medications and you feel good, you don't feel that you need it because you feel good. When you stop taking them because you don't feel like you need them, you don't think, hey, let me call my therapist, let me call my psychiatrist. And then you also have to think about making appointments. Sometimes you may not necessarily be able to schedule an appointment when you need with a team that's already assigned to you to help you with your mental health. In the midst of that next appointment, you might feel like, okay, I'm gonna just go to the hospital because I need some help right now. But who I'm linked with, they don't have availability until next week, or they have an open spot on Thursday and it's Sunday night and I'm going through it. So sometimes we might be the buffer in between an established team that's already assigned to their care.
My other question that kind of camps onto that. Now, I know you've been speaking in generalities, but I'm going to get a little specific in regards to Black people, African Americans, however you want to word it. We typically, I think now they're making, oh, I have a therapist more mainstream in general. You don't feel so much of a stigma attached to it. But yet and still in our culture, you don't go outside your household to deal with problems, period. That's still what some folks say today. Do you find that you're starting to see that people need help, more people of color versus non-people of color?
I would say,
and I wasn't trying to stump the panel by any means. I just thought it's interesting.
Yeah, I would say you have more younger people willing to accept mental health assistance, whether it's referrals to some type of outpatient facility, or just being in a therapeutic atmosphere to assist their needs. Now, when it comes to an older generation, and again, not trying to be funny, but if you're, I would say, 50 and over, even 45.
Yep, Gen X for sure.
I would say it's a lot harder to help that population in some instances, because a lot of the times they feel like, okay, my grandmother went through her whole life and didn't need any type of mental health services, and she was okay. She prayed her way out. Sometimes certain generations might feel that the church is their therapeutic outlet. Let me go talk to my pastor, which is fine. But unless your pastor is a licensed professional, they're very limited on how they can help your mental health aspect. And it even comes to just medical care, right? A lot of individuals who are older suffer a little bit more. They take a lot more medications for their medical conditions, for a little bit more hard-headed. Things have progressively gotten worse. Even older populations, they're either very dismissive of it because they feel like, hey, I'm 80-some years old, I'm 90-some years old, I did well without having it, I don't need it now.
Right.
Some of them are open to it, but you have to also baby step them with it. In my pros, I always say, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you.
Oh, it's not you, it's me. Yeah. Who hasn't heard that before?
So you have to approach it, let them know seeking help doesn't mean that there's a problem with you. There is just resources to help you through your problems. And I just feel that sometimes they just don't feel that they need it because they didn't need it before. Why are you telling me I need it now? It's an older person who generally wants that. We always can provide the resources, but a lot of times they're more dismissive. You see a lot more younger. And I would say the older, and that goes for Black, white, Hispanic, wherever, like the older generations, they're just not really for it. I feel like that's also another reason why the older generation feels that the younger generation is a little bit more soft.
Correct.
Because they are a lot more expressive in their feelings. And I don't validate
social media.
And I'm not saying that they can't be. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, some of the younger generations are a lot more extra with it.
For sure.
I'm a millennial, so I'm like in the middle of being introduced and being a little bit more open to it than say like my parents. Sometimes, because we also realize that your mental health also affects your physical health, right? A lot of us are becoming more aware and open to it because we see more benefits to receiving help. And that's across the board, regardless of race, gender. It's just kind of like where you fit in your age. And I think a lot of more African Americans do understand the benefits of getting mental health, doing a mental health check. That's why you start seeing a lot more platforms where they're encouraging that, which is a really good thing, because I always tell people, yes, I don't see my therapist all the time because there are tools that he's given me to help me utilize through certain situations. But it's also good just to do at least a check-in once a year, just like you'll go to the doctor for a physical checkup. It doesn't hurt to just get a mental health tune-up, because sometimes we might not know we're going through something until we might just have a brief session, and then next thing you know, you're crying. It's, oh, damn, I didn't realize I was going through all that.
Right.
I'll be honest, I don't have statistics on younger versus middle and older generations or ethnic groups that are seeing therapy a lot more. I'm just seeing the awareness a lot more, and that they're really pushing it especially in communities of color. They are really doing it. I was surprised when I was working in the ER, there are certain racial or ethnic groups that were coming to the ER for psychiatric evaluations that we don't think of. You don't think of somebody in the Asian community coming in for a 5150 evaluation. You don't think of somebody who is of the Middle Eastern or Indian
Right.
background coming, and we actually have dealt with those in that population. It's just interesting.
I know you said you don't have statistics. I'm just talking from my generation and even my grandparents' generation. To your point, I got this far. I don't need that. In my household, it was more or less what goes on in this house stays in the house. That's how my part of it was raised. I'm glad to see that you're in this health field because there weren't many people of color or even Black people in the mental health realm. Me as a Black woman going to somebody non-Black explaining my issues, I might even know where the deep-seated issue comes from. How can you at least get the history without me having to give you the history of why I'm feeling what I'm feeling? We all know what it's like to be a person of color when you walk into a room and how you're supposed to conduct yourself. I don't need to explain all of that to you because you know what I'm talking about. So having somebody going to a therapist that doesn't look like them and then you're expecting me to open up to you, I can tell you right now, that's for some people, that's not going to happen. If you're looking to get help, you can maybe a session or two and you could tell right off the bat if that's going to work. And not saying if you look like me that it's going to be a one and done either. I'm more apt to open up or want to talk to somebody that can understand from whence I come. I'm glad that you being a young person and hopefully there's younger people coming in behind you that are doing this because I'm going to get up there one day. And the fact that it's, oh God, I got kids older than you, but
Yeah.
I might be more apt to say something as opposed to someone else coming in. It's just not going to happen.
But you'll be surprised because you're getting a lot more African Americans as social workers and other people of color. You're starting to see a lot more of that, I would say, within my generation because everybody wants to be an impact, right? They want to impact the communities that they come from. And they realize the lack of representation in these fields.
Right.
Doctors, right? I know they said that there's a shortage with doctors and stuff like that, but the hospital that I work at, I was actually really surprised. I'm starting to see a lot more Black doctors in different areas. I start seeing a lot more Latino, and those two in particular, because I feel like those two were the ones that aren't really represented the most. But as a Black woman, I met with certain individuals that I felt a little bit more comfortable. Some of them might give me a pass because they feel like I might be younger, but they understand the cultural background that I come from. So
Exactly.
I've seen the impact that's
Yeah.
happened so far. One of the things that my manager had specifically said at the hospital that I work at, he wanted to make sure that he has a lot more representation within our department. It actually has really made an impact because you want your employees to reflect the type of patients that you're seeing. It's actually helped out. But sometimes I'll get an individual who is a little bit older. When I get situations where a patient is older and I feel they may not be as receptive to me, I talk to their kids who are probably around my age or their grandkids and say, hey, we have a referral for your loved one because they don't want to take their medication. I'm more than willing to talk to your loved one, but I'm 34, this person is 80. I don't think they're going to take it from me. Hey, take your medication. I said, how can we work together so we can make sure that your loved one. So when I'm dealing with somebody older that feels, okay, I'm not going to listen to you. I got kids older than you. Yeah, you do. But we're going to work together to make sure we can make something work.
I had one more question because I understand where you're coming from with regards to not having a lot more representation. You see a lot more young people who are more open to sitting on the proverbial couch than the 50 and older generation. My question is, because there's this ongoing thing now about men in mental health, Black men more specifically in mental health. Do you see more Black men more open to being seen and laying on that proverbial couch and talking?
I would just say this, in the spaces that I've been in, you don't see a lot of men. Now, what some men, specifically Black men, have done, they have created like a podcast. They will create certain types of social groups so they can commune with one another. But I don't see them actually seeking mental health, nor do I see a lot of Black males in mental health either. Coming to California, what I see is different than maybe somebody in the Midwest. They might have a lot more representation.
Atlanta.
Yeah, a lot of Southern and probably Midwestern, maybe East Coast. You might have more representation and a lot more Black males seeking mental health resources than where I am. I don't see it. It just hasn't been something that I have seen. You do see that a lot more males talk about needing to be more open. So a lot of conversations are there, especially on social media, about Black males seeking care, but right now I just haven't seen a lot of representation on both sides.
Gotcha. So you don't see the
Yeah.
representation on the West Coast.
I would just say that there might be a little bit more representation, maybe like in the immediate Bay Area, you might actually have a lot more, but in the area where I am, I personally don't see it. And I don't want to always judge social media because I don't know where they're showcasing their stuff, but I would just say this part of Northern California, I don't see a lot of representations like that, either providing the care or receiving the care.
That makes sense. I think Black men are still into the barbershop talk,
Yeah.
still coming together in the barbershop. That's
Right.
like their own little
Yeah,
therapy.
that's
Kind of like
their
women,
meaning. That's
right?
their meaning.
Salons and the nail shop. But
Yeah.
men really are into the barbershop and airing their stuff in the barbershop.
Yeah, and like I
Yeah.
said, you got to also realize too, a lot of certain generations, their therapy is going to church,
Yep.
right?
You're
So
true. That's
sometimes the
true.
church is still some type of therapy for them.
They always said that
The
was a hospital. They
like,
refer to
and
it.
I feel like church is a good foundation for some, but you also have to realize some people will be like, hey, if the Lord wants me, sometimes they'll look at the church, but not necessarily realize you need the best of both worlds. Sometimes you might need that pill. God got you connected with that type of insurance. God got you connected with this person. So you can go get that pill. So you can go get that help.
Right.
And I do
also
feel
feel
it's a lot of the churches or the pastors, ministers. You do catch some nowadays that are saying you don't only just need your church family, but you should